In the 3rd century CE, Rome ruled the Mediterranean world, but for a brief moment it lost the East. Egypt, Syria, Arabia. They answered not to an emperor, but to a queen. Her name was Zenobia, and this is her story. Chapter 1. Context. In the 3rd century CE, Rome entered a period of extreme instability known to modern scholars today as the crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome burned through emperors at an astonishing rate. Over 20 men claimed the throne in barely 50 years, many of them weak, short-lived, and propped up by nothing more than a small military force. And political chaos was compounded by severe economic strain. Coinage was repeatedly debased, inflation spiraled out of control, and trade routes began to fracture under pressure. At the same time, there was growing external pressure coming in the form of the Sasanian Persian Empire in the east, pushing hard at Roman borders, while the Goths, among other so-called barbarian groups in the Balkans, were launching repeated incursions. Rome could no longer effectively manage and control every single distant province. It stretched itself too wide and would now pay the price. Military authority was increasingly delegated to local strongmen, meaning that in practice much of the empire, especially in the east, was semi-autonomous. And it was from this very unstable imperial environment that figures like Zenobia would rise, not just to rebel, but to challenge the fractured Roman Empire head-on. Chapter 2. Palmyra and Early Life. To understand Zenobia, we must understand her city. Let me introduce you to the beautiful city of Palmyra. Located today in modern-day Syria, in antiquity it sat at a crossroads between the Mediterranean world and Persian Mesopotamia. Palmyra was a very wealthy city, built on the caravan trade of silk, spices, and luxury goods flowing between east and west, and protection of the routes which carried them. It was a wonderfully culturally hybrid place, with an Aramaic-speaking population, local Semitic religious traditions, and obviously a very strong Greco-Roman influence. It was truly a city between worlds, culturally, politically, and economically. And it was here that Zenobia was born around 240 CE into a wealthy aristocratic family under the Palmyra name Batsabai. Now, Palmyra was a patriarchal and patrilineal society where power was formally passed down through male lines. However, elite women were given slightly more autonomy than traditional Roman law did. They could own property, could act as benefactors, and appear prominently in inscriptions, clear archaeological evidence of their social and economic influence. Our sources, mostly later Roman ones, tell us that Zenobia completed a remarkably high level of education. She was well versed in history, philosophy, and Greek paideia, the elite education system of the Mediterranean world. Zenobia is said not only to have spoken her native tongue Aramaic, but also Greek, Egyptian, and possibly Latin. And yet it was within those boundaries that Zenobia was learning how power worked. Chapter 2. Odenathus. Now enter Septimus Odenathus, a leading Palmyran aristocrat and at least initially loyal to Rome. After Roman Emperor Valerian was captured alive by King Shapur I of Persia in 260 CE, an unprecedented humiliation, the east of the empire was left exposed. Into that vacuum stepped Odenathus. He was granted the exceptional title of Corrector Totius Arentis, corrector of the entire East, and became Rome's commander-in-chief. Practically, he ruled the East with near imperial authority. And Zenobia married Odenathus in 255 CE, likely at about the age of 14, as typical for women of this period. They had one son called Wabalath. However, the likely designated heir was Odenathus's older son from a previous marriage called Hiron. This slight succession ambiguity becomes very important later on. Evidence suggests that Zenobia played a pivotal role during Odenathus's rule. She played a central role in governance, managing wealth and estates, appeared publicly, and participated in court culture. She was even described as possessing manly traits by Roman writers, reflecting their gender bias. As to Roman writers, competence in power was something that needed to be masculinized. Chapter 4. The Assassination. In 267, everything changed. Odenathus and his son Hiron were both assassinated. Some ancient sources name the killer as a man called Menneus, though his motives remain deeply unclear. Odenathus was a very powerful figure, and as soon as it happened, conspiracies flourished immediately. Later Roman sources even hint at Zenobia's involvement. But there is simply no direct evidence of this. Modern scholars see these accusations as Roman propaganda, an attempt to discredit a woman that would soon become very powerful. But what is certain is what followed. With Hiron dead and Wabalath still a minor, Zenobia stepped into the role of regent. In doing so, she gained control of Palmyra's military forces, its vast treasury, and legal authority over all of its estates. What had once been influence behind the scenes was now formal power. Chapter 5: The Conquests. So, how did Zenobia turn a Roman client state into a breakaway empire? Not with a sudden declaration of independence, but with patience. Zenobia's break from Rome was gradual and calculated. She was very careful not to openly provoke the empire early on. Coinage was still minted with the emperor on it, and her son Wabalath was not styled as an emperor, but as dux or rex, military and royal titles that still sat, at least technically, within Rome's system. This strategic ambiguity bought Zenobia time. While Rome was overstretched and distracted, Palmyra could expand. One of Zenobia's most capable generals, Zabdas, launched military campaigns which brought Syria, Arabia, Petrea, and large parts of Anatolia under Palmyran control. Province by province, the Eastern Empire was switching allegiance. Then, in 269 CE, came the decisive move. Egypt was absolutely vital to Rome. Not only was it incredibly wealthy, but it was also the empire's primary source of grain. Control Egypt and you control Rome's food supply. The Roman prefect attempted to resist Zenobia. He was executed. Alexandria fell under Palmyran control, and coinage was printed in Zenobia's name. So by 270 CE, the mask had dropped. Zenobia adopted the imperial title Augusta, while her son Wabalath was styled Augustus. This was the clear, open challenge to Roman sovereignty, and there was no going back. And under her rule, Palmyra did more than just conquer, it flourished. Zenobia's court hosted intellectuals and philosophers, and culture reached a peak, blending Roman political forms, Greek intellectual traditions, and local Syrian identity into something truly its own. Chapter 6: Aurelian. Back in Rome, however, the situation was changing. Out of the chaos emerged one man determined to reunify the fractured empire. Ruthless, disciplined, and devastatingly effective. His name was Aurelian. Aurelian became emperor in 270 CE and moved very quickly. After securing the western provinces, he moved east and set his sights firmly on Zenobia. The two forces met near Antioch, and Zenobia's armies were defeated. There was a second confrontation at Emesa, which ended in the same result. Step by step, Aurelian was forcing the Palmyran armies into retreat. Zenobia fell back to Palmyra, but as Aurelian's legions closed in, she attempted a daring escape, fleeing east to the Persian border. However, she was intercepted and captured near the Euphrates River. Palmyra surrendered. For a brief moment, the city was spared, but after it rebelled again, Aurelian responded with brutal finality. Much of the city was destroyed, and those who resisted were executed. The Desert Empire was finished. What happened to Zenobia herself is a bit of a mystery. Many sources disagree, sometimes dramatically. Some claim she was paraded through the streets in chains during Aurelian's triumph in 274 CE, while others say she was granted clemency and lived out the rest of her life in a small villa near Rome, married into the Roman aristocracy. Still, some say she starved herself or was just executed quietly. Our main literary source for these accounts is unfortunately the Historia Augusta, a notoriously gossipy and unreliable piece of evidence. Because of this, modern scholars tend to favour a more cautious conclusion, that Zenobia perhaps survived, but lived out the rest of her life as an aristocratic captive living under Roman supervision. Chapter 7: Legacy. Zenobia's empire fell, but her story did not end with defeat. In Roman memory, Zenobia becomes a sort of paradox, really. On the one hand, ancient authors couldn't ignore her discipline, her intelligence, and immense success as a military leader. Yet, All of them failed to explain it. Again and again, the same language is used. They call her manly. Her authority was framed as an exception to womanhood rather than an expression of it. And this wasn't praise, it was containment. By translating Zenobia's great power and authority into something masculine, the ancient authors protected their own ideas and assumptions about power. In their worldview, a great leader was something that was male by definition. Zenobia broke that mold, so she had to be reshaped to fit back into it. But Zenobia was never trying to be a man. She ruled as a woman, navigating and mastering the political systems available to her. She used culture, symbolism, and delay as weapons. She understood legitimacy just as much as any Roman emperor, and her power was something not accidental or emotional, it was something deliberate and calculated. And that is precisely why she frightened Rome. She revealed something deeper about the empire itself. Rome liked to imagine power flowing outward from the center, from emperor to province, from civilization to periphery. But Zenobia really reversed that logic. She demonstrated that power could be built on the margins, and the empire could be challenged not with chaos, but with competence, intelligence, and resolve. For a brief moment, the East did not need Rome, and that idea, more than her armies, was intolerable. In the centuries which followed, Zenobia would repeatedly be rediscovered and repurposed. In late antiquity, she became a moral lesson about ambition. In modern Europe, she is seen in paintings as a tragic, exotic queen. But in the Middle East, especially from the 19th century onwards, she is remembered as something different, a symbol of regional power. In modern Syria, she's appeared on banknotes, not as a defeated rebel, but as a reminder of what the region once was and what it could be again. And yet that legacy was violently challenged in 2015 when ISIS systematically destroyed large parts of ancient Palmyra. They were doing more than just destroying stone, they were trying to erase memory, to sever the present from a plural, complex, pre Islamic past. Temples fell, arches collapsed, and statues were shattered, but Zenobia still survives. Zenobia endured because it was never just about the monuments. It was about agency, about power flourishing out with the prescribed roles, and about a woman who refused to stay legible to empire. Zenobia's rebellion failed militarily, but culturally, symbolically, it succeeded. She forced Rome to take her seriously, she forced ancient authors to try and explain her away, and today she continues to force us to ask uncomfortable but necessary questions. Who gets remembered as a ruler and who gets framed as an exception? Why does female authority still need to be masculinized, softened, or justified? And how many Zenobias didn't make it into the records at all? Zenobia really matters immensely because she exposes the fragility of the systems which tried to silence her. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next one.